Chaka. Wait! Don't sell my friend. We work better together. You can get rid of someone else. The slaves gaped at this sudden outburst, and Chaka wheeled, raising his club. You shut up. You're a slave. You tell me once more to do what, and I kill you. Jason shut up, since it was very obvious that this was the only thing he could do. He had a few qualms about Mikah's possible fate. If he survived the wound, he was certainly not the type to bow to the inevitabilities of slave-holding life. Yet Jason had done his best to save him, and that was that. Now Jason would think about Jason for a while. They made a brief march before dark, apparently just until the other slaves were out of sight, then stopped for the night. Jason settled himself into the lee of a mound that broke the force of the wind a bit, and unwrapped a piece of scorched meat he had salvaged from the earlier feast. It was tough and oily, but far superior to the barely edible krenoj that made up the greater part of the native diet. He chewed noisily on the bone and watched while one of the other slaves sidled over toward him. "Give me some your meat," the slave asked in a whining voice, and only when she talked did Jason realize that this was a girl. All the slaves were alike in their matted hair and skin wrappings. He ripped off a chunk of meat. "Here, sit down and eat it. What's your name?" In exchange for his generosity he intended to get some information from his captive audience. "Ijale." She tore at the meat, held tightly in one fist, while the index finger of her free hand scratched for enemies in her tangled hair. "Where do you come from? Did you always live here? Like this?" How do you ask a slave if she has always been a slave? "Not here. I come from Bul'wajo first, then Fasimba. Now I belong to Ch'aka." "What or who is Bul'wajo? Someone like our boss, Ch'aka?" She nodded, gnawing at the meat. "And the D'zertanoj that Fasimba gets his arrows from, who are they?" "You don't know much," she said, finishing the meat and licking the grease from her fingers. "I know enough to have meat when you don't have any, so don't abuse my hospitality. Who are the D'zertanoj?" "Everyone knows who they are." She shrugged with incomprehension and looked for a soft spot in the sand to sit down. "They live in the desert. They go around in caroj. They stink. They have many nice things. One of them gave me my best thing. If I show it to you, you won't take it?" "No, I won't touch it, but I would like to see anything they have made. Here's some more meat. Now let me see your best thing." Ijale rooted in her skins for a hidden pocket and dragged out something that she concealed in her clenched fist. She held it out proudly and opened it, and there was enough light left for Jason to make out the rough form of a red glass bead. "Isn't this so very nice?" she asked. "Very nice," Jason agreed, and for an instant felt a touch of real sorrow when he looked at the pathetic bauble. This girl's ancestors had come to this planet in spaceships with a knowledge of the most advanced sciences. Cut off, their children had degenerated into this, barely conscious slaves who could pride a worthless piece of glass above all things. "I like you. I'll show you my best thing again." "I like you too. Good night." Chapter 5. Ijale stayed near Jason the next day and took the next station in line when the endless krenoj hunt began. Whenever it was possible he questioned her, and before noon had extracted all of her meager knowledge of affairs beyond the barren coastal plain where they lived. The ocean was a mystery that produced edible animals, fish, and an occasional human corpse. Ships could be seen from time to time offshore, but nothing was known about them. On the other flank the territory was bounded by desert even more inhospitable than the one in which they scratched out their existence. A waste of lifeless sand, habitable only by the D'zertanoj and their mysterious caroj. These last could be animals, or mechanical transportation of some kind. Either was possible from Ijale's vague description. Ocean, coast, and desert, these made up all of her world, and she could conceive of nothing that might exist beyond. Jason knew there was more. The crossbow was proof enough of that, and he had every intention of finding out where it came from. In order to do that, he was going to have to change his slave status when the proper time came. He was developing a certain facility in dodging Ch'aka's heavy boot. The work was never hard, and there was ample food. Being a slave left him with no responsibilities other than obeying orders, and he had ample opportunity to discover what he could about this planet, so that when he finally did leave, he would be as well prepared as was possible. Later in the day another column of marching slaves was sighted in the distance, on a course paralleling their own, and Jason expected a repeat performance of the previous day's meeting. He was agreeably surprised that it was not. The sight of the others threw Ch'aka into an immediate rage that sent his slaves rushing for safety in all directions. By leaping into the air, howling with anger, and beating his club against his thick leather armor, he managed to work himself into quite a state before starting off on a slogging run. Jason followed close behind him, greatly interested by this new turn of affairs. Ahead of them the other slaves scattered, and from their midst burst another armed and armored figure. They churned towards each other at top speed, and Jason hoped for a shattering crash when they met. However, they slowed before they hit and began circling each other, spitting curses. "Hate you, M'shika!" "Hate you, Ch'aka!" The words were the same, but shouted with fierce meaning, with no touch of formality this time. "Kill you, M'shika! You coming again on my part of the ground with your carrion meat slaves!" "You lie, Ch'aka! This ground mine from way back!" "I kill you way back!" Ch'aka leaped in as he screamed the words and swung a roundhouse blow with his club that would have broken the other man in two if it had connected. But M'shika was expecting this and fell back, swinging a counter blow with his own club that Ch'aka easily avoided. There followed a quick exchange of club work that did little more than fan the air, until suddenly both men were locked together and their fight began in earnest. They rolled together on the ground, grunting savagely, tearing at each other. The heavy clubs were of no use this close and were dropped in favor of knives and knees. Jason could understand now why Ch'aka had the long tusks strapped to his kneecaps. It was a no-holds-barred fight, and each man was trying as hard as possible to kill his opponent. The leather armor made this difficult, and the struggle continued, littering the sand with broken-off animal teeth, discarded weapons, and other debris. It looked like it would be called a draw when both men separated for a breather, but they dived right back in again. It was Ch'aka who broke the stalemate when he plunged his dagger into the ground and on the next roll caught the handle in his mouth. Holding his opponent's arms in both his hands, he plunged his head down and managed to find a weak spot in the other's armor. M'shika howled and pulled free, and when he climbed to his feet, blood was running down his arm and dripping from his fingertips. Ch'aka jumped after him, but the wounded man grabbed up his club in time to ward off the charge. Stumbling backward, he managed to pick up most of his discarded weapons with his wounded arm and beat a hasty retreat. Ch'aka ran after him a short way, shouting praise of his own strength and abilities and of his opponent's cowardice. Jason saw a short, sharp horn from some sea animal lying in the churned up sand and quickly picked it up before Ch'aka turned back. Once his enemy had been chased out of sight, Ch'aka carefully searched the battleground and scavenged anything of military value. Though there was still some hours of daylight left, he signaled a halt and distributed the evening ration of krenoj. Jason sat and chewed his portion reflectively, while Ijale leaned against his side, her shoulder moving rhythmically as she scratched some hidden mite. Lice were inescapable. They hid in the crevices of the badly cured hides and emerged with clicking jaws whenever the warmth of human flesh came near. Jason had his quota of the pests and found his scratching keeping time with hers. This syncopation of scratch triggered the anger that had been building within him, slow and unnoticed. "I'm serving notice," he said, jumping to his feet. "I'm through with this slave business. Which way is the nearest spot to the desert where I can find the D'zertanoj?" "Over there, a 2-day walk. How are you going to kill Ch'aka?" "I'm not going to kill Ch'aka. I'm just leaving. I've enjoyed his hospitality and his boot long enough and feel like striking out for myself." You can't do that," she gasped. "You will be killed." "Ch'aka can't very well kill me if I'm not here." "Everybody will kill you. That is the law. Runaway slaves are always killed." Jason sat down again and cracked another chunk from his krenoj and ruminated over it. "You've talked me into staying a while.